What is your personal encounter with the paranormal, ghosts, aliens, sleep paralysis, glitch in the matrix? If you enjoy the video, please consider subscribing. Thank you for all the newcomers. Welcome, I'm happy to have you here. Enjoy. My sister had a dream that she was kidnapped and being used as a sex slave in a random basement in an unknown location. Obviously it freaked her out, but that's not the crazy part. The next day her ex-boyfriend called her to ask if she was okay because he had a dream that she got abducted and nobody knew where she was. Parallel universe leakage. I really like this explanation for coincidences and shared dreams. I had a kind of similar glitch in the Matrix a couple of years ago. I kept having dreams that my car was untaxed, which was ridiculous because I knew I paid it a month earlier. It was 2 weeks later that I found out the DVLA had incorrectly exported my car, so it was no longer under their jurisdiction and therefore no longer taxed. This had happened 11 days previously. Around the time of my dream. Spooked me out for ages. My wife of 22 years died earlier this year. She was every bit the happy homemaker. Every day after I went to work and she would make our bed like a soldier in basic training. It had to be just perfect, including the massive pile of throw pillows we had to unload every night and stack on a small couch in our room. During the last few months when she became bedbound, I of course had to take over all the cleaning duties, which did not include a daily making of the bed. So the pillows remained stacked on the couch for months without moving. The night she died, I was awoken by the sound of a fan in our room being knocked over. I turned on the light and the pile of throw pillows, which had not moved in months, fell into the floor and knocked over the fan that was about 2 feet away from the couch. I piled them up back on the couch and got back into bed. I checked the time to see how long I had been asleep. It was 2:12 in the morning. My wife's is the 12th of February. I've been married for far less than you had, but the thought of her passing away is too much to handle. Please be well. Yes, this. My heart literally hurts. Not me, but my dad. He grew up in a small village in Greece. One day on his walk home, it was storming quite heavily. He was standing under a tree in an attempt to wait it out. As he's waiting, he's approached by a slow old woman who he'd never seen before. She had an umbrella in one hand and a walking stick in the other. She asks him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm waiting out the storm so I can go home. I don't want to catch a cold." She tells him, "You have a long life ahead of you. I would risk catching a cold if I were you." And with that, she starts to slowly walk down the street and out of sight. My dad waits for a few more minutes and takes her advice. He starts walking home. A few more minutes pass and he hears an explosion. He turns around and sees the tree he was waiting under was hit by lightning and blew up. Frightened, he runs to his home, hoping to bump into the old woman to thank her, but he never saw her again after that encounter. He's convinced she was a paranormal being since he never caught up to her that night, even though she was so slow. He had never seen her in the village before or after that moment, and no one knew who he was referring to when asking around for her. Edit. Changed mortified to frightened. When I was 19 or so, I had moved into my first apartment alone. I got all my furniture from the thrift store next door. They were pretty good finds too. My favorite was a pair of red armchairs that I'd often fall asleep in while reading. One night I woke up and there was a little girl sitting in the chair across from me. My lights were still on as I had fallen asleep reading, and I could move around, so I don't think it was sleep paralysis. She started playing peekaboo and so I played back. When I removed my hands after the third time, she was gone. I did have sleep paralysis at least 3 times a week in that apartment, but it was nothing like that night playing peekaboo. Oh number. She got you. One night I was going to sleep and all of a sudden I start sweating profusely. I try to get up and turn on the AC and I could not move from my bed. I was confused and a bit scared. I tried to shout to my sister in the next room over. I couldn't talk either. At this point is when I saw a dark figure in the corner watching me. It felt like years until the silence broke. It muttered in a distorted voice, "You are not safe." At this point I could hear my heart pounding like it was in my ear. Next thing I knew, the figure moved across the room and to the foot of my bed. It stared into my soul and then I could move. I was soaked in sweat and that night I did not sleep. To this day I have never had sleep paralysis after that, and I still wonder, am I really safe? I was plagued by chronic sleep paralysis throughout my teen years, but I never had hallucinations. This sounds terrifying. My mum's experience with what she thinks was a ghost. She went outside around 10 p.m. for a cigarette years ago and saw a very elderly woman walking up our neighbor's back stairs to their veranda. Mum said she wanted to ask if she was alright. It was very rare for our neighbors to have visitors that late. They were also elderly, but Mum said she completely lost her voice and felt stunned, though she couldn't look away. She ended up getting out a hello and the woman just disappeared. The next morning Mum made a joke to our neighbors asking why she wasn't invited over for their nightcap with their visitor, and they very casually replied, "Oh, so you've now seen our ghost too?" They were excited over it and not at all scared. Berry, neighbor, says an elderly lady follows Elwin, his wife, everywhere and they feel pure comfort around her, but their own children and grandchildren are frightened by the lady on the stairs when they stay. We lived in the same house with my grandparents. I was almost 3 years old when I walked into the kitchen where Grandma and my parents were just talking, and I said, "Did you see Grandpa? He has just flew away." A few minutes later the phone rings and you can guess the rest. I don't really remember OFC. But Grandma says that anytime she thinks about that, it's a relief, because it reminds her that there is something on the other side. I am not into spiritualism or anything, but I am glad if it helps her, and I think the story is kinda creepy. Stuff like this really makes me wonder about the afterlife. My grandmother came to my dad the night she died and told him she was okay. He found out the next morning that she passed. He also has a history with being able to see ghosts. Just recently, about 2 weeks ago, I was on my way to Home Depot, when I arrive at this stoplight. After sitting there about 15 or so seconds, the light turns green. As soon as it did, I felt like I couldn't move at all. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like if something was telling me to not go just yet. After about a second or two, this red Ford Explorer barrels through the intersection, running the red at what must have been about 50 miles per hour. I DK how much exactly, but it went ridiculously fast. After the car sped through the intersection, I could move again. I don't know what that something was, but had it not been for that I would have probably not been able to tell you all this little story. Edit. Holy crap, I did not expect to get this many upvotes. Thank you all for replying and blowing this up. My mum was about to cross the road one day. The light turned green for pedestrians to walk, but my mum saw a lady across the street. Her eyes got really wide, like something was wrong, and my mum just stared at her instead of crossing. A car sped through the lights, and just like your story, my mum wouldn't be here if she hadn't noticed that lady and stopped to stare at her. Growing up, my sister and I were good friends with our neighbor, Matt, who had a dog, Molly. Molly ran away one day, so the three of us set out into the nature preserve behind our houses to look for her. Matt's brother, Chris, set out separately. In the preserve is an old dam mill from the 1700s that is rumored to be haunted. When we got to the mill, we saw Chris and the dog on the other side of the river, maybe 30 yards away. "Matt, I got her. I'm bringing her home," Chris yelled. But something didn't feel right, and the three of us gave each other that look. We headed home knowing Chris would be a bit behind us since he'd have to go a mile or two out of his way to cross the bridge. When we got home, there was Matt's mum and the dog. She was under the porch the whole time, she said. A little while later Chris showed up, having never even gone into that part of the woods. Plot twist, you saw the real Chris and Molly in the woods. The ones who showed up later took their places. Congrats, you made it to the end. Here's an awesome deal. If you share this with 5 people, you will have good luck for the next week. Also, please make sure to subscribe for more epic Reddit videos like these. I'll see you very soon.